Right. Without further ado, our first speaker, Masari. Well, I think it's the Bloomberg of crypto. Masari's mission is to promote transparency and smarter decision making in the cryptocurrency. Sorry, I hear myself double. In the crypto asset community. Their open source data library helps researchers, investors, and regulators makes more sense of the community. And with us today is Mason Nystrom, Senior Research Analysis. Mason,
hey, thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you with us. So many thanks for joining us. You're joining us from New York City, right?
I'm based in Washington, D.C., but we do have a strong community of Masari employees in New York.
Okay, cool. But great to have you with us today. I mean, you're just waking up, I guess. So really happy that you taken the time for this conversation. Let me start. I already gave a short introduction about Masari, but I'm curious to learn what is your background in blockchain? Where did you start your blockchain journey?
Yeah, so I started my blockchain journey coming out of my MBA. I started working for a local cryptocurrency exchange in Hong Kong and fell in love with the industry. This was during the 2017 run-up, and then came back to the States in 2018, joined Consensus on their team as a marketer, focused on helping some of Consensus's portfolio companies, working on some content, and then transitioned to Masari about a year and a half ago, where I am now a research analyst, where I cover everything Web3, from NFTs to DAOs to social tokens and some of those emerging trends.
Yeah, a lot of exciting topics that we will definitely cover in this conversation. Shortly, I described Masari as the Bloomberg for crypto. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a perfect description. So we're trying to become the Bloomberg for crypto. So we have a variety of product suites across real-time events monitoring for over 200 different crypto assets. We actually just launched a new protocol or new product yesterday called Governor that provides governance monitoring and tracking. So we aggregate a bunch of proposals from a variety of assets and then also enable users to vote on those proposals all within our platform. And then we also have our own research product as well.
Really, really interesting. Now, let me start with the topics you already described. We have NFTs, metaverse. Let me start with Webfree. According to you, what is Web3?
Yeah, Web3 has this all-encompassing term, and over the past 6 months, it's really grown. So I kind of view Web3 as this next phase of the internet. And in my mind, that means the democratization of it towards the internet that is not owned by companies and corporations, but one that is owned and operated by the users of those individual protocols. And so on a operational level, what that looks like is taking all of the existing services all the way from the very bottom of your internet service provider all the way to the top of the consumer applications you use on a daily basis and replacing those, unbundling them from the existing internet infrastructure with open source protocols on permissionless blockchains.
Cool. Now you mentioned like the last 6 months, it took like a flight, right? It went really fast with all the developments and all the PR, the attention in the news. What was the most important development in the last 6 months, and what would you foresee for the upcoming year would be the most important development?
Yeah, so the most important development, in my opinion, is at the infrastructure level. And so Web3 still has a lot of infrastructure that it has to build out before we can build the types of applications and services that everyone is kind of envisioning that, will be built in the next, say, like 5 years. And so that infrastructure phase, whether it's across like computational networks, whether it's across storage protocols or any other core piece of internet infrastructure, is what's getting built out now. And then kind of the more visionary side of it is, like the quote unquote metaverse. And that tends to be like the consumer side that everyone is looking towards in terms of what types of applications can be developed. And I still think that while the metaverse is very vague, it will be built strongly with a lot of the crypto network primitives that exist today.
Interesting. Now, already some startups within the metaverse blockchain ecosystem have emerged in the past months. What is the most exciting development with respect to blockchain within metaverse that you see developing right now?
Yeah, so I would say one of the most exciting things to me is how we're seeing this infrastructure, and so part of that includes like non-fungible tokens, starting to integrate into the existing apps and services we use today. So for example, Twitter has demoed an NFT integration where you can essentially connect your Web3 wallet with your Twitter profile to verify that you own NFTs. And those type of applications are going to kind of be this middle ground where we move from the existing Web2 world to the Web3 world. And it's those types of trends that I think are going to be really exciting for consumers. But there's still, like I said, a bunch of infrastructure on the metaverse side that also has to be built out.
Yeah. So you mentioned NFTs. I think you're also doing research into the NFT scene space, right?
Yes.
So what is the research about? Already have some findings you can share, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So I research NFTs across a variety of different blockchains. So you have blockchains like Ethereum, which hosts the majority of NFT activity. And then you have up and coming blockchains like Solana and sidechains on Ethereum like Polygon that have started to see an increase in their NFT volumes as well. And then as far as like types of applications, over the past year, it was what I can kind of consider the first NFT growth cycle. And as we've seen the first kind of initial breakout applications were digital art, there were sports NFTs like NBA Top Shot, and status goods, which is kind of like a PFP or NFT avatar type project. And so those are these initial applications, but an NFT can be anything. And so I'm very excited for how those continued applications continue to be built out.
Cool. Now, also yesterday we already spoke about things like the Great Ape community and all the crazy developments with the bigger companies actually now entering the NFT scene. If we look to NFTs, according to you, what should be further developed within the NFT sector?
Yeah, so if we take a step back and we think of blockchains as enabling us to tokenize everything that can be tokenized, that includes anything from airline miles to different types of assets. And so NFTs are just one way that we're going to tokenize a bunch of assets, but that requires infrastructure. And one of those core pieces of infrastructure that I think is really important is the financialization of it. So being able to obtain a loan based on your assets, being able to increase liquidity, create more robust marketplaces. And so all of that type of infrastructure is actively being developed. And I'm really excited for that over the next 6 to 12 months.
Nice. Meanwhile, I'm checking the comments in our open event platform. If there are any viewers at home would like to ask you a question, but I don't see any questions right now. But I still have some questions for you. Looking back, I mean, you're having a great view from Masari, actually, of all the crazy developments that we saw in the past year. What was the most unexpected trend that you actually were faced with in the past year?
That's a great question. And it's funny because in retrospect, NFT volumes, for example, were quite minuscule. Maybe they were doing 100 million in the month of January and February. And now, in the month of like November, it's easily 1 billion, peaked in August at just under 4 billion. And so I think that what has been surprising is the rapid growth that we've seen, but also just the continued normalization. And so there's a bunch of different assets that are eventually going to be tokenized, and I've been looking kind of excitedly into what comes next. And so I think that's a trend that excites me.
Cool. There's already 2 questions coming from the audience. One of them is do you see the most where do you see the most opportunities for NFT adoption in the next years?
So I think that there's going to be adoption for individual NFTs across consumer brands. So something like Bored Ape Yacht Club is what I kind of imagine as a modern day consumer brand. So just as like you'd have like a streetwear company like Supreme back in the day, you now have these NFT projects that can spin up their own communities. And I think that that trend will only continue to grow. More like to the stance of the infrastructure side, there's dozens of pieces of core infrastructure that needs to be developed, whether that's from NFT appraisal, whether that's from niche marketplaces like creating IP marketplaces, automating different types of processes that you can use NFTs and blockchains. And so I think there's going to be growth like widely across a variety of sectors.
Cool. We just discussed for the upcoming year the infrastructure when we look, for example, to the Web3 developments. What is the development that you are the most excited about for the upcoming year and the upcoming 5 years?
That's a great question. I would say one of the core developments that I'm really interested is in how all of these services get aggregated. And because right now they're individual services. So you have individual networks for data storage, individual networks for computation. And to date, like the user experience is still very challenging if you're a developer. And so I think that user experience is going to get much better over the next year, and that's going to rapidly improve the types of applications, services, and just general innovation that we see.
Cool. Yeah, a lot of users are now entering the NFT scene. Do you think, I mean, some people, they say that NFTs are actually becoming a really, really, really big bubble. How would you respond to that?
I would say that every individual asset class goes through cycles. And whether that's the stock market, whether that's Bitcoin, whether that's DeFi, layer ones, NFTs, they all go through cycles. And what comes out of those cycles ends up being widely valuable. And so I don't know a single person who researches or invests in NFTs who won't tell you that 90% of them are going to zero and not going to be valuable long term. But the 5% that remain are going to be real game changers in terms of how we look and value companies, how we look and value assets, and important in the evolution of consumer behavior.
Within the NFT scene, we see also developments like the Bored Ape Communities. How do you see this evolving? Is it just a single thing, or you see more opportunities for companies, for organizations to also build their own NFT communities?
I think that every large organization or company should be thinking about NFTs, and if they're not, then they're vastly underweighting the importance that they're going to have. And so it will be interesting to see how digital native communities like the Bored Ape Yacht community, like Meebix, like CryptoPunks, are able to leverage their existing brands and either partner with existing companies like Adidas, like we've seen. And I think that there's going to be a lot of room for growth. I think that the projects that have continued success will be the ones that continue to innovate, continue to develop new products and services for their users.
Cool. Now, we spoke about several really exciting developments like the NFT communities, Web3, and so forth. What are the current hurdles that you foresee? Is it like lack of regulation, too much regulation, no collaboration?
There's a couple different hurdles. So from the technical side, we still need more scalable blockchains. There's a lot of scalability solutions on Ethereum that are live or launching in the next 3 to 6 months. And so that should be interesting to see. Regulation continues to be a core issue just because you don't want regulation that is going to hinder innovation or adoption. And then finally, I'd say kind of the last core hurdle that we have is just usability. And it's still fairly technical to onboard users into NFTs or developers into Web3 infrastructure. And so as that improves, it will get better, but definitely a pain point today.
Because yesterday we had a very interesting conversation about DAOs as well. Can you regulate them? What is next for DAOs? We see some interesting things happening now in the Netherlands also. Some first DAOs actually being launched. But most of the founders, they indicate they're actually being, they just are not able to launch it properly because of all the regulation. Do you see this now in other countries, in the US maybe, where it is actually working out, where regulators are working with the founders of the DAO to actually make it happen?
So I don't know from the regulator side. What I can say is that there are a variety of different types of DAOs, and you can think of kind of a DAO is a different type of like corporate infrastructure, one that is digitally native. And so what has been a fundamental focus from the beginning is finding ways to bridge DAOs with the physical world. And so some DAOs have LLCs that are attached to them and therefore can do things like open bank accounts, invest in companies that require a legal entity. I think that as that trend evolves, we might get to a point where that maybe is no longer necessary. But for the time being, it's definitely been a pain point in terms of the broader expansion of DAOs.
Yeah. So looking at Masari, I already told the audience that you really built this open source data library to really help researchers, to help investors, to help regulators to really make sense of the industry. What is next for Masari in the upcoming year?
Yeah, so like I said, we launched our newest product, which is Masari Governor. It's a free product that anyone can log in to Masari, create an account, and you'll be able to track a variety of assets that you probably maybe invest in or are familiar with. And I'm really excited about that product because it's really brings together our suite of tools across kind of the entire asset lifecycle, from research to monitoring the assets in their key events to voting on governance proposals. And so as the industry continues to mature over the next year, Masari is very excited for where we're going. And I don't think anyone isn't incredibly bullish long term.
Bullish long term, industry maturing for sure. Yesterday we had an interesting conversation also about what is next? Everything in the world concerning the economy, inflation, prices of commodities, etc., are going crazy. Cryptos as well. Do you have any expectation or thoughts about cryptocurrencies in the upcoming year? Big crash. Of course, you don't have this magic ball, but is there from Masari stance, do you have a certain idea what it could, what way it could go?
Regardless of what happens with the overall economy, whether there's a stock market correction or a crypto asset correction, I think that Bitcoin will continue to increase its narrative as an inflation hedge and store of value asset. And as investors search for yields that are greater than what they might see in the bond market or the emerging markets market, they're going to increasingly look at crypto. We've seen a record amount of dollar inflows in terms of venture capital into the crypto space. And I think that only continues into the future. And the appetite is clearly there. So, even if there's a correction, I'm still widely optimistic that the space will continue to grow.
Wow. Well, beautiful, optimistic, positive end note for our conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mason Nystrom from Masari, for joining us in this virtual event. Really appreciated your time and taking time to actually talk about all the trends that you see. Good luck with Masari. Definitely going to take a look at the platform, the new platform. So really curious how this looks. But many thanks again, and wishing you a great day.
Thanks for having me.